Hello and welcome to the outside of my studio. In this video I'm going to show you how I came up with this image. Now this is one of two images which I'm going to show you how to create today, the second of which is this one. Now making images like this is more to do with finding things in your environment which will make a good seed picture. These are obviously post-processed to give them the look that they've got. For instance, the first image actually started out looking a bit like this, and the second image actually started out looking like this. So for the first of these images I chose this palette. So to capture this image, what I'm going to do is set the lens on my camera, which is a 70 to 24mm zoom, to about 50mm, and because it's a fairly overcast day, which is quite frankly what I wanted, because then we can have a natural lack of contrast in the image. The post-processing that I'm going to use will increase the contrast in the image. So if I start with something which is a little flat, that will help. If you're trying this on a sunny day, you could of course use a large overhead to put some shade over your subject, but because it's quite cloudy today, quite naturally the lighting is very soft, which is what we want. Okay, so with the lens set at about 50, I've set the sensitivity on the camera to about 800 ISO, which is going to be fine. It will give me a little more leeway so that I can use a reasonable shutter speed since I'm hand holding it, and also I can then use a smaller aperture which will give me a larger depth of field. So I want something which is sharp but a bit flat. Okay, so if we just line up the shot here, I want a little bit of outside around the subject so I can crop it later. There we go. And we'll just take a few with varying apertures and shutter speeds. So if I set the shutter speed to about 250, that's giving me an aperture of about f8, which is fine. And that looks fine. I can check the image on the back of the camera, and that's more or less what I want, I think. Okay, so with that captured, I'll look around for the next image, which is just round the corner here. So nestling at the back here, we have these two old railway sleepers. Now I've picked these because they have quite a lot of inherent pattern and detail, but at different scales. You should be able to see that on the front here you have the larger scale of the cracks and so on, and the grain in the wood, and then you have a smaller scale of this sort of crazy paving effect which has happened because these have become very, very weathered. Now using this as a seed image is going to be quite a good idea, because it already has quite a lot of recognizable pattern within it at different scales. And one thing that humans generally are quite good at is picking out patterns. Okay, so to actually just capture the image, it's relatively straightforward. Again, I'm just using the lens at about 50mm and framing up the subject from more or less its own level. So getting quite down on the ground, quite low. And there we go. So that's giving me an exposure of about 250th at f8. So we'll just capture that. Always a good idea to bracket stuff, especially outside if you're in manual. It will give you a choice later of densities. So I'll just take that down on the aperture, and then back up again. Okay, so for capturing the images, that is just about it. So it's just a good thing to remember to allow plenty of space around your subject so that you can crop it in later in post-production. Right, so I'll pick out the best of those and drop them into Photoshop, and that's what we'll be doing next. So here we are in Photoshop, and from all the images that I took outside, I've picked these two, this one and this one, to do some further processing with, to take them from being a mediocre image into something a bit more special. So, starting with this one, first thing to do I think would be just to make a duplicate layer, like so, and then with the duplicate layer selected, I'm just going to rotate the whole thing by 90 degrees. So I'll just go down to transform and rotate. And there's lots of different ways to do this, but I tend to do it this way because I'm used to doing it this way. If you actually hold down the Shift key and then use the rotate command, it will move in 15-degree segments. So I want 90 degrees, so I'll stop there. And we'll just click on OK. Right, so with that rotated, what I will do now, just to blend these two layers together, I will change the blend mode from normal to something else. Now, another little trick you can do here is as soon as you actually select one of these, you can then use the arrow keys to run through the rest of them. So for instance, that's darken, multiply, color burn, linear burn, etc. There is no right and wrong way to do this. It is literally just up to your own interpretation and the sort of result that you want. So I would suggest you just run through the lot, have a look, see which ones you like, and then go back to it. Now I quite like the darker colour, so we'll just go back to darker colour. There we go. I think the effect that that's had just on this nail area, for instance, is quite good. Okay, so with that done, what I think I'd like to do next, just so that I can do some global changes on the whole thing, I'll make a stamp layer which will be a combination of everything which is visible. So just click away from any of the layers to deselect them, hold down the Shift key, the Control key, the Alt key, and press the E key on the keyboard, and that will make this stamp layer. So you can just turn the other ones off, or you can just leave them on. It will make no difference because this contains all the information from the ones below it. So with this selected, what I want to do is just add a bit of a blur to that image, Gaussian blur. So we'll come down to blur, go for Gaussian blur. And again, this is personal preference. There's no right and wrong way to do this. I think I just want something around about 10. That looks about right to me. And I'll click OK. Now once again, I'm going to change the way this is blended with the layers that are underneath it. So I'm going to click on the layer blending. And this time I think I'm going to go for overlay because I quite like the dreamy sort of result that makes. So that's with that set, and that's without it. So I think that's looking quite nice actually. And really, apart from cropping the image down, that's about it. So if I just go to the crop here, With this being more or less a square image, it'd be nice to have a square crop. So we'll just move this in a little. Perhaps that's a bit too far. Let's take that back out there again, I think. That's quite nice. Yeah, quite like that. So click on the OK to get that started. And there we have it. Once the crop is produced, I think for this particular image, that is a pretty good result. Right, so moving on to the other image. Basically, I'm going to use very similar techniques here. So first of all, I'm going to just make a copy, duplicate layer, like this. Then rotate that by 90 degrees. Like so. This time I'm fairly bothered about where this is going to be put, so I just want to reduce the opacity a little and just move this around so I can see where it's going to go. Yeah, I think that's quite nice. I like this cross which it's making in the middle here. I think that looks quite nice. Okay, so with that done, there we are. And again, we just change the blending mode until we get one we like. Oh, that's quite nice. That's again darker colour. The darkened ones seem to work for this particular subject quite well. Yeah, so I think I'm going to go to either darker colour or darken. Darken. I think I'll leave it at darken. Okay. So with that done, what I think I might like to do now is just, I'm going to make another copy of the background. So select the background and just make a duplicate layer of that, like so. Then I'm going to add an adjustment layer, and I'm going to add the exposure adjustment layer, like so. And we'll probably just take the exposure up a little, just to lighten up the background copy a bit. So again, this is personal preference, but maybe about 1.5-ish, something like that. And I'm going to change the gamma correction and just take that down a little. As you take this down, it actually reduces the contrast. Can you see that? So it's very sensitive, so you don't need very much of it. But I think somewhere around around 80 should do me, like so. Right. So with that done, you can see now the difference that's made. If I turn that on and off, it lightens the image up quite considerably. Okay. So then, once again, I think I'll make a stamp layer of the whole thing and then just do some global adjustments. So click away from all the layers, Shift, Control, Alt and E. So that's given me this layer at the top here. And what I might do with this is just do a fairly arbitrary adjustment. We'll go for just brightness and contrast, I think. Brighten it up ever so slightly and just add a bit more contrast, give it a bit more punch. Yeah, somewhere like that. Click on OK. And then finally, we'll just go for a crop. Now this time, I probably can do a 16:9 because I don't actually want very much of the surroundings. I just want to keep the rest of the image in there. Something like that would be quite nice. Now it is all leaning ever so slightly, so I will just straighten that up. There we go. Maybe just bring that in a bit, just to lose that edge. There we are. Yes, I think that's looking very nice. We don't need content aware on, and we don't need to necessarily delete all the cropped pixels. So we'll just click on OK. There we are. Now I think that's quite a result, considering the original that we had before. So there we have it. That's my interpretation of how you can make something out of nothing. Basically taking a seed image and processing it into something which is entirely different. Now, if you like watching these sort of things, do click on the other images as they appear, and don't forget to subscribe. Thank you very much for watching.